I want to talk a little bit about authorization controls in a rich client app with the mobile API back end. We've seen aspects of what we're going to talk about throughout the remainder of this module in previous demos, but I want to try and tie it all together in a very neat fashion here. So let's imagine this. We have a client UI. So consider our sample mobile app, the vulnerable one. We've got something running in a Windows phone with a nice touch interface that we interact with, and that is what we, as the user, see. Now inevitably, behind that pretty veneer is some form of client authorization controls. The client is going to either allow us or disallow us to do certain things. So for example, as we've seen with this app, the client makes a decision about whether to turn on the vote and comment button or not, depending on whether the user is currently logged on. If you are logged on and you haven't voted on the vehicle in context already, you'll get a text area and a vote button. If you've already voted, you'll get nothing. This is the client making decisions about controls in the UI. Sure, it may be making those decisions based on the response from the API, but ultimately it's making the call within the device as a result of the message it gets from the server. Now, of course, complementing all this, we should have server authorization controls. And really what we're talking about here is an independent process, independent to the client that is, that validates whether what the user is attempting to do can or cannot happen. In the previous module, we found a vulnerability with this. We found the server was happy to let someone vote twice on the same vehicle. So clearly there was a missing server authorization control. It trusted that the client control was in place and had done its job. Now, of course, the bit in the middle that makes all of this risky in the mobile app world is the transport layer. So we've got this great big whack of HTTP or HTTPS that sits between the client and the server. And as we now know, it can be manipulated. We could change the request. We could change the response. We can control exactly what the client hears from the server and then exactly what the client tells the server. And that is why that server auth control is so important, because this guy at the front, the client, is entirely untrustworthy. Let me give you a perfect real-world example of where I've seen this recently. One of the world's largest airlines, who I won't name here, but let's just say it is one of the biggest, has a mobile app that members of its loyalty program can log into to gain access to certain benefits. One of the features an authorized user can gain access to is the lounge Wi-Fi passwords. So here's how it's meant to work. You open up the app, you can go and try and get the Wi-Fi passwords, but it will tell you that you need to log in first. So then in theory, you go and log in with your legitimate credentials, you get authenticated. Also assumedly, that happens legitimately on the server back end. The server responds and then tells the client that they can now have access to the Wi-Fi passwords. In theory, all of that works just fine. But here's the problem. What this particular app does is when it loads, it sends all the Wi-Fi passwords anyway, before you even log in. So all you have to do is proxy the traffic, open the app, and hey, there's your Wi-Fi passwords. No hacking, no nastiness, just looking at the data that is already being sent to the phone. So this diagram perfectly illustrates where that process breaks down. There is no server auth control. There is only client auth control. The client already has the data, and it's trusting the server to tell it when it can show it to the user. That is clearly entirely unsatisfactory. And again, that's a real-world example that's been around for a long time. Not exactly the smoking gun of security vulnerabilities, it's just Wi-Fi passwords, but a perfect example nonetheless. Let's go back to our vulnerable app and look at a very similar example that again illustrates the problem we see right here in terms of missing server-side controls and clients trusting whatever response that web layer in the middle that can so easily be manipulated is sending it.